Okay, I got
And
it.
I'll try to watch the chat box for you.
Okay, well, let's get going then. As I said, let me see here. I'm Cody Tony. I am a parent first and foremost. I have two boys, Connor and Cruz. Connor, at the age of 3, was diagnosed with autism, and I didn't know much about that at the time. So what I started doing was, like anybody else, started doing research, trying to figure out what I could do to help him. And over the years, I've got a lot of training, as you can see, through special education law and different other things. Now, that does not mean I'm in any way an expert. It just means that I've been through a lot of training, and so I started helping other people, and along the way, I've become a lay advocate, as well as started running a nonprofit organization to help families. So we're always here to help. We have a Facebook page and we have a website, pervasiveparentingcenter.org. It'll be on at the end here too. So, but enough about me. Let's get on with the show here. Okay. That tells you a little bit more about the Pervasive Parenting Center. We are doing this in conjunction again with the Oklahoma Family Network. And I appreciate them asking me to come do this. We do have a grant from the U.S. Department of Ed, the Office of Special Education Programs. That's who pays me to do this. And so they make sure that I have enough training to do this as well. All right, here we go. So we're going to get into IEPs a little bit, because that's what this is all about, your basic rights in special education. So we always talk about an IEP as an involved, educated parent. And one thing that I always tell parents is nothing scares schools more than a parent that is educated. And I'm not talking about degrees. I'm not talking about anything like that. I'm talking about somebody that goes into an IEP meeting knowing their rights, knowing what they can get, and knowing what they can do. And that alone, and not that we're trying to scare, because I don't want this to come off as an us against them. In fact, if you go into a meeting with the school, whether it be an IEP or any kind of meeting, with an us against them, you're already setting yourself up for disaster. So we're going to talk a little bit about what your rights are so that you'll know that ahead of time, okay? What is IDEA? Well, it stands for the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. It was signed into effect in 1991, I believe, but it basically is a law that makes sure that your child, if they have a disability, is not only protected with their rights, but also that the school is looking for those disabilities. And we'll kind of explain that here in just a little bit. So there's 6 principles. Now, if you guys look up here on the right-hand side, if anybody's been in an IEP meeting, you have seen this, and I have enough of those to probably wallpaper a mansion with. But those are special education rights. They have to be offered to you at every IEP meeting, and they usually are. But there are 6 principles behind special education. Number 1, they're going to give you a free and appropriate public education, or you may hear FAPE. We that work in education or special education a lot, we use acronyms. So if we or if they say some kind of acronym that you don't understand, stop them and ask them what it is, okay? Because I promise we go through BIPs and FBAs and FAPE and LRE and all of this stuff so much that it's just second nature. It's like another language. But all of that stands for something. So if you have a question, make sure that you stop and ask, okay? All right, so it also, it makes sure that you have an appropriate evaluation for your child. That is written into the law as well. We're going to get into what that means here in just a minute. If your child has that evaluation and we find that there is a disability of some sort, learning disability, developmental disability, something that is impeding their education, then we're going to have an IEP to help them with services. You have a right to the least restrictive environment, or LRE. That means that your child will be in the best placement that they can be to help them with their education. And again, we'll get into this a little bit further in a few minutes. You also have the right to participate in decision making. That means that you and your student, because once they turn 16 or they're in the 8th grade, they need to start working on transition, which means that it needs to involve them as much as possible, okay? And then procedural safeguards. So there are a lot of safeguards in place to protect you and your rights, and we'll get into some of those later on. All right. So let's start with least restrictive environment. Let's see here. So again, what is the most appropriate placement in the least restrictive environment? Where can we put this child to help him learn the best? And I think I put a visual in here. I'm not sure if I didn't. I'll explain it to you as a triangle. So you start with their peers in a mainstream classroom. We're going to let them be in there as much as possible, okay? When we see that that child is not receiving the services or the education that they need, then we start looking at, okay, do we need to place them in that part-time and maybe in with pull out, go to a resource room part of the day? Do we need to maybe put them in the resource room most of the day, and then on up to a secluded or a self-contained classroom, which may be the least restrictive environment for some students. But the team and you are the ones that decide that, okay? The school can't just automatically say, oh, your kid needs to go down to that classroom at the end of the hall, okay? You guys have to work that out to make sure that that's the best placement. So talk about your rights. You have the right to know about all special education services. Now, will the schools tell you all of the services that they have? And I always get parents that ask me that. Well, how do I know what I need? Well, that's where those meetings come in. You sit down with your school and you start talking out. And I would write everything down ahead of time and say, okay, this is my concern that, whether it be he doesn't read well with distractions, or he has outbursts or meltdowns. Write those things down and sit down with your team. And that team, that includes an administrator, a special education teacher, a classroom teacher, you as the parent, and anybody else that gives services, whether that be speech, occupational, and we'll kind of get into that in a minute. But so they have to be in that team together to discuss everything, okay? But within that, they should tell you everything that you need to know about special education services for that child. So if they, and we'll get into evaluation in a minute, if they evaluate and they say, okay, this student really needs speech, they have to let you know that based on the evidence that they have from the evaluation. You have the right to question or appeal the placement of your child in a special education class or service. If that's not the place that you think is best for your child, you can appeal that. You'll go, and I think we get into that here in just a minute, but you do not have to agree with everything that happens in an IEP meeting. And you have the right to other educational settings at public expense. What that means is if you and the school decide that your child is not going to be best served in public education, but they would probably benefit from a private institute. I'm going to give you an example of either the School for the Blind or the School for the Deaf would be a good example of that, okay? Those are probably going to be the best for some students to learn. And so if you guys agree on that, then they can go to the one of those schools, and public education or the school district that you're in will pay for that. Okay. Okay. Let's see here. Thought, why is it that it seems all special? I'm going to try to read the chat a little bit as we go along. Rooms are at the end of the hall. Getting those classes closer to the gen ed rooms will make it easier to integrate. That's a good question. I kind of use that as an example. I've been in a lot of schools and they're in different places. I am in Lafleur County, and in Lafleur County, we have a co-op. So they actually take them out to different sites. They may not even be in the same town. So it's kind of a crazy deal. It just depends on where you're at. So, okay, related services. So related services include anything that would help that child the best as they can. So that includes, but it could be beyond this, but assistive technology. By the way, assistive technology means anything. Most people think it's just computers or iPads, but it could be a grip for a pencil, or it could be a desk that tilts to help better, with reading, or anything like that. It could be a sheet for a person with dyslexia to help them better see the words. So. Audiology, so hearing, counseling services, occupational therapy, physical therapy, psychological services, and speech language therapy. Those are included, but it could be a lot of other different things. But those are the main ones that we hit on here. You have the right to those services if the school determines that they are eligible by evaluation. So let's talk about the evaluation. So you have the right to a full, free, and individual testing for your child's education needs for purposes of evaluation and placement. That means the school, if they decide or if you request, and it can work either way. I've seen it work both ways. I've seen a school that is proactive and says, okay, this child we think they have a learning disability, and they request the parent, hey, can we do an evaluation to determine whether or not he needs services, okay? The other way is, if you think that he needs services, you can request in writing, and we'll get into that here in just a second, but you can request in writing to have an evaluation done. And then the school, if they determine that it's feasible and that you have enough legitimate concerns, they will do an evaluation. That being said, if you listen to nothing else I say tonight, this may be the most important thing. Nothing happens unless it is in writing. If you talk to the school and you say, hey, I would like to do this, or they say, hey, we're going to do this, if it's not in writing, it never happened, okay? Make sure that when you leave there, you either have them have something in writing from them, or I would even follow up with an email or a text saying, hey, just wanted to follow up and make sure what I understood from this meeting that we had was that you wanted this, this, and this, okay? That way you're starting a paper trail, and they can't come back and say, well, that never happened. You can show that you actually had that conversation with them, okay? You can refuse permission for evaluation. I've actually seen parents do this. I'm not sure why they would do this, but you have the right to refuse permission for an evaluation of your child if he or she, if you just decide that maybe they're not, they don't have a disability. Rarely does this happen, but it does happen. And then you have the right to obtain an outside independent evaluation if you disagree with the school's evaluation. So I get into this a little bit deeper in a minute. So if I don't, somebody remind me and I'll come back, but I'm pretty sure it's a little bit later on a slide. You have the right to have your child reevaluated at least every 3 years if necessary. And that is the norm. You have 3-year evaluations, okay? If you haven't had one in 3 years, I would talk to the school and see what's going on. Okay, so when we discussed that just a second ago, if you and the school don't agree, let's say the school has done an evaluation and you don't like what the school says, you think, okay, I don't, the school is telling me that my son doesn't have um, a learning disability. Let's just throw that out there. But I know he does. Then I can request to have an outside evaluation, okay, um, from an expert, and then the agency has to do one of two things. Okay, if you request an IEE or an independent educational evaluation, then the agency must first initiate a hearing to show that its evaluation is appropriate. Okay, they have to defend basically their evaluation and say, we did this, this, and this, and according to that, he does not seem to have a disability. Okay, or if they don't do that, they don't want to defend it, then they have to pay for the outside evaluation. If the public agency shows at a hearing that its evaluation is appropriate, then parents can still obtain one outside, but it's at their expense. Okay? Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Let me look at the chat real quick. Jesse Barnett, I wish our community had a co-op. There are good and bad to that, and that's all I'm gonna say. It's I'll leave it at that. IEP process. So you have the right to participate in the planning. Okay, so now we're saying we have an evaluation. That evaluation says that our child has a learning disability or a developmental disability or something that is impeding their education. Now we can participate in an IEP, okay? And you as a parent must be present at the IEP meetings. There are a few exceptions to this, but they're far and in between. The only reason a school can have an IEP meeting without the parent is if they tried to contact the parent many times, at least, I think it's at least three, but don't quote me on that, but several times, and the parent did not respond, and they have that documented, then the school can meet without the parent and put an IEP into place. That's the only way. If they meet and without you, um, you probably need to contact somebody just to either the school or an advocate. And I'm an advocate, or you could contact the Oklahoma Parent Center. They have lay advocates that will work with you, but in some way contact somebody if that's happening, okay? And then state your opinion and make recommendations for special education services. You have the right to do that. Nobody knows your child better than you, okay? Nobody. So you must be involved in this. You must tell them what you want, what you need, what you think the child needs. And then review your child's IEP and progress towards goals at least once a year. Every year you have to have a new evaluation, or not a new evaluation, I'm sorry. You have to have a new IEP meeting to renew, set new goals, or make sure that the goals are being met. Okay, let's check chat. Our kiddo was transported to OSD Chickasaw Satellite Campus. Provided one-on-one aid. He ended up going 2 days at home district and 2 days OSD. 2 days this past year. Sorry, I'm reading this. We cannot stress enough how amazed our school district was with him, to him. Dreams, I'm very thankful. That's that's good news. Good news. You are okay. And then I'm with Terry. That's great news. So Anytime you've got a good success story from an IEP meeting, and they happen, trust me, usually by the time they get to me, as an advocate, we've had some issues, so. Oh, and you can request changes to your IEP at any time. You can call an IEP meeting at any time that you want. Now, they have to give that to you within a reasonable time, and that's all it says is reasonable time. That means probably a couple of weeks, I would say, depending on how busy they are and what's going on with the school. Let's see. Written notification. So you have the right, they have to notify you in writing. The school must provide prior written notice each time a proposed or it proposes or refuses to initiate a change. That means anytime that they want to add something or take away something from your IEP or from that child's services. Let's say they want to cut you down from an hour a week in speech to 30 minutes. They have to call an IEP meeting, and they have to do that in writing to you. I may be mistaken on this. I can't remember exactly, but I think they have to do two separate. I think they have to do like a by mail and then by an email or a text or something. But don't hold me to that because I can't remember. It's been a little while on that one. Usually schools are pretty good at that though. Anytime they want to change your identification, that means if they want to change from autism to learning disability, they have to give you prior written notice. They have to call an IEP meeting. If they want to change the evaluation, if they want to do a new evaluation, or they want to discuss the old evaluation and change what's on there, they have to contact you. That's your right. It's also your right anytime they change educational placement. Now this one gets really complicated because educational placement can mean a different classroom or at home. There's a lot of different ways they talk about educational placement, and so anytime that happens, we're dealing with the least restrictive environment, the LRE that we talked about. So educational placement, but anytime they do that, you need to be notified if that's going to be a permanent change of placement. And then provisions of faith. Again, anything that has to do with a free and appropriate public education, they have to let you know if they're going to take and change that. Okay. Thank you, Terry. She's working the chat for me. Written notification. So the notice must include this. It must include a description of the action that your school district proposes or refuses to take. So they have to put in detail what they're going to do to your child's services. They also have to try to explain why. We're going to do this because it's going to be best for him, and why is it going to be best for him? They have to give a description of other options to the team that the team considered. So we can't just say, okay, we tried this and it didn't work, so we're going to try something else. Well, we tried a couple of different things. That's what they need to tell you is what are the options that we came up with as a team. Hopefully you guys worked out some options, and if you did and they didn't use those, they also have to give you why they didn't use those. Evaluation procedures, assessments, records, reports, any of that stuff that helps them determine placement or IEP goals, they have to include that into the written notification. And then any other factors which are relevant. And that could be a teacher's evaluation of the child in a classroom. It could be a speech therapist saying, he did this, and I don't know that that's necessary anymore for speech. Those kind of things. It also must include a statement that you are protected under IDEA, and that is in every written notice they give you. It should be. It also must be written in a language that is understandable to the general public. That means they can't go into Old English on it or some kind of crazy, I don't know. It can't be. It ha- I want to. It has to be understandable. I mean, that's the best way I can put it. Understandable to you, but also it must be provided in your native language. Okay, if your first language is speech or Spanish, I'm sorry, then they must provide it in Spanish, um, or any language. You have the right to your child's records. You can see your child's records at any time, and you can have copies made. Now, they can charge you. Um, Most schools don't, but some do, and it must be a fee that's reasonable. It can't be outrageous. If they charge you an outrageous fee, um, one of the tricks I was taught by a mentor, and I'll just kind of tell you this one because this is a story she told me, and I think it's relevant to this. They can charge you, and that's okay. Maybe 10 cents a copy, whatever Kinko's or some other place might charge you. If they do that, that's okay. But if they say, well, you have to pay, $5 a copy or something outrageous, I would say, can I have that in writing? I want to see that you request that same amount for any parent that comes in here and ask for it. I had a mentor that said she went in and they were going to charge her an outrageous amount, and she said, "Do you charge everybody else that?" And of course, the secretary says, "Sure, we do." And she said, "Okay, can I get your administrator to write down that that is the normal fee?" And the lady started backpedaling and saying, "Okay, that's not what we normally do." So it has to be reasonable. You have the right to know what kinds of records exist and where they're located. Um, Usually, special education administrator has those, or could be an office secretary. But where they exist and what kind of records exist. And it's usually your IEP, it's usually your evaluation, and it's usually any kind of testing scores that they've got. You have, and it could be medical though. Um, you have the right to request that a record be explained, changed, or destroyed. Believe it or not, you can go in and say, "I don't want this in my son's or daughter's file." And if you request it, they should destroy it for you. Now, that being said, I'm not sure why you would want to do that, but you do have the right to do that. And also, they're probably going to ask you to do that in writing, and I would do that anyways. If you're set on having something destroyed, then it's not going to hurt you to write it out.
Cody, you have a question real quick that says, wouldn't that have to be a team decision?
What is that? The destroyed? You can request. Yes, you're correct. I mean that. Here's the deal. You can request any of this stuff, but as a team, they're going to have to come up with the decision and say, okay, yes, it will be, or no, it won't. Okay. Remember, the team goes both ways. If you want that, I would put it in writing, and then the team says, no, we need to keep that in here just in case. Let's say it's a medical thing, okay, and you don't want that in there because you're afraid somebody's going to get to see that doesn't need to. Well, the team can say, well, we need that in there in case there's an emergency, and they could keep it in. So yes, iPhone, whoever you are correct. It is a team decision just like anything else. All right. When it's not working, and you can see sometimes that is what an IEP meeting looks like. You can ask the school to discuss any disagreement about your child's identification, evaluation, IEP, or placement at any time. And most schools encourage it. If you have something that you don't agree with, contact them. Send an email, send a text if you're that, close to the teacher or whatever, and say, hey, can we sit down and just discuss this? It doesn't even have to be an IEP meeting. You can sit down with the teacher or the special ed teacher and say, here's my concern. And if they decide that it's something that needs to be changed on the IEP, then we need to bring in the team and do an actual IEP meeting. But you can call a meeting at any point. You can invite a lay advocate to the meeting. You can invite anybody to an IEP meeting. Anybody. You can invite the neighbor next door. In fact, I've seen, and I hate to say this, but I've seen it so many times, it's true. I've seen women walk in with a man, and the IEP meeting goes completely differently than it does if she's there by herself. And so sometimes I have actually said, if you've got a cousin, an uncle, a brother, anybody that wants to go to that meeting with you, take them. Just see how it goes. I've gone into meetings with people. I've sat at the back and never said a word. And when we walked out, they said, that went better than any meeting I've ever been to. And I said, I didn't do anything. I didn't even say a word. But having that presence there of somebody else, especially male, for whatever reason, we've seen that happen so many times. I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying I've seen it happen. But as I said before, a lay advocate, you can contact me. I usually work the eastern part of the state, and I stay within 4 counties here. But if it's outside of that, I can recommend Oklahoma Parent Center or somebody else. And right now with Zoom, I can help you probably anyway. So you can also contact the State Department and file a complaint. If it's not working and you don't like it, you don't agree with it, these are kind of the steps too that I go through. Talk to your school first. Bring in an advocate, an outside advocate. Then contact the
And
State
that can
Department.
also be the Oklahoma Family Network.
Yes. Yeah. Call Terry, or anybody. You can have anybody come in and sit in with you. We've all been through it already. So, but then if that doesn't happen, that doesn't work, let's go to the State Department and you can file a complaint with them. You can contact the Dispute Resolution Center. That'd be the next. And usually if you talk to the State Department and they feel like it's a big enough complaint, they will usually send you to the Dispute Resolution Center. Same thing for me. If we've been in a meeting and we're still not getting what we need, I ask you to contact the State Department next. That's your next step. And then they'll usually send you to the Dispute Resolution Center. And then I say after that, contact a lawyer. Now, some of you guys are probably thinking, well, I can't afford a lawyer. Oklahoma Disability Law Center is free. You can contact them. I can get you their information when we finish here and put it in the chat, but just look up the Oklahoma Disability Law Center and they will help you out with free advice for IEPs, disability, anything disability related. Okay. And then you can request an impartial due process. If you've gone through all of those other things, due process is the last step, okay? That means you're going to have to go into a hearing, usually with a judge or somebody higher up than just the schools or the State Department, and you're going to have to plead your case, which is where all of the paperwork comes in that I said. Make sure you're keeping a paper trail. But hopefully, you'll never have to do a due process. I've never had one of the cases that I've worked on go to due process. That doesn't mean they don't. It just means that usually we get everything resolved ahead of time. Never be afraid to ask questions. I was a journalist in my former life, and I had an editor that told me that if you have a question, chances are somebody else does, so ask it. Basically, you're talking about your child's education and your child's future for that matter. So I'm going to ask any question, even if I feel like maybe it's a dumb question. Remember me talking about those, the FAPE and the LRE and all of those. Stop somebody and say, hey, I didn't understand that. Can you please explain that to me? And they will. Most of the time they will. I've done that as an advocate. I've said, wait, hold on just a second. Can you tell me what BIP means? Well, it's a behavior intervention plan. But if you've never heard that before, it's best to ask, okay? Um, believe it or not, that is it. That is our training. That is short and sweet. And as I said, it is basics, but I think you guys are going to have a lot of questions probably. I don't guarantee that I'm going to have all the answers. I also do an IEP training, which is kind of an extended version of this, okay? This was just your basic parent rights. And so, we can talk to Terry about maybe doing one of those at some point. But let's open this up to questions. If you guys have questions and you want to, go ahead and unmute yourself and we'll take them as we can. So,
Cody, I have a quick question.
okay.
We're in Tulsa, and my son goes to G. Have had an IEP meeting scheduled for tomorrow to talk about going back in person for the, like up here they're calling it level 3 and 4 kids that are going to go back in person. And G called me today letting me know that they were going to only be serving kids 2 to 3 hours a day for 2 to 3 days a week, basing it on legal advice they've been given by their district's attorney. And because all of our our districts up here typically use the same legal team for the advice that they're receiving right now. Yeah. I am curious if you have any advice on how to handle this IEP meeting tomorrow, because he has a seizure disorder, and so like every time we're not in a classroom setting, we just go further and further back.
Okay. Well, and I knew this would get complicated because COVID has made everything very complicated. The best advice I can give you is make sure that you have all of those concerns listed out ahead of time. This is why I think it's best for him to be in a classroom and make sure you make your point. Now, health issues, they're going to say, is going to be number one. And rightfully so. I mean, your child's health is what they're concerned with.
Sure. So the legal reasons that they're giving is that such as COVID could potentially override fate, and I can't wrap my head around that at all.
From what the State Department and the U.S. Department of Ed has told me, that no, that's not true.
Okay.
FAPE is a federal law,
Right.
And so no, it doesn't override FAPE. You may want to contact the State Department ahead of time. When is your meeting?
Well, it's tomorrow, and last week they told me we would be in person full time, and this week they're saying, oh, we're actually not.
Okay. Are you doing Zoom?
Yeah.
What time are you doing Zoom?
1.
At 1?
Yeah. Tell you?
Would you like me to sit in on that? I can.
I would love you to. Yeah.
Okay. Do me a favor. I'm going to type in here my email.
It's on your page. It's on the screen.
Okay.
I see it. Yeah.
Send me your phone number through email, and I will call you in the morning and we'll work that out.
Okay.
And I may have to call the State Department ahead of time just to make sure we've got everything. But from what they've told me, you can't override FAPE at this point. Now, that being said, they're going to talk about concerns. They have to offer you what they're offering everybody else, though. So if the other students are not going to class,
well, that's what they're offering. All special ed students are getting 2 or 3 hours a day, 2 or 3 days a week. But none, like I work for a local Head Start, and so we partner with the other 3 districts in the area, and they've not been given that advice. They're going back full days.
Okay.
For their significant kids.
Okay. Well, let's discuss that tomorrow morning. I'll help you the best I can. Right now, we'll just talk to them and see what they say.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Anybody else?
Cody, you can also stop sharing your screen if you want to, so
Oh.
you can see everybody
Yes, sorry.
on the screen, and you would be able to see the chat box better. Sorry.
Gotcha. No, you're right. Okay. Are we there?
Yeah, let me just ask you a quick question,
Okay.
Cody, without if you had a family that was taken into an IEP meeting because of a situation that happened with the student, but it happened to the student, not because of the student's actions, and they were taken out of PE for their safety and no other option was offered, how would you feel that that should be handled? And the IEP team told mom that this was the team making this decision, so it didn't really matter what she thought.
Okay, so the student was taken out of PE. Is that what you're saying?
Basically for being bullied and some violent actions that had happened to him.
But not
Not
because
that
of his
he
behavior.
had done, not because of his behaviors, but because of what happened to him.
Okay.
And they decided that it would be best, because they didn't have appropriate supervision to handle everybody, to take this one student out of PE or gym.
Yeah,
And it was put on his IEP, and mom was basically told that there's not really anything she could do because the rest of the IEP team agreed on it.
okay. The first thing I would do is ask for that in writing. I want that in writing. I want you to tell me why he's being refused his PE, which is honestly, that's change of placement. So the team should have met to change the IEP. You're dealing with least restrictive environment. Now you're putting me in a more restrictive environment because now if it's my safety, I understand that. But what did you do? I would want that in writing too. What did you do ahead of time to make sure that he was safe? But I want it all in writing because I want them to tell me exactly why my child is not getting the same thing that his peers are. And then if they give that to you in writing, you can request a new meeting and say, okay, if that satisfies you, then that satisfies you. But if it doesn't, I would say, look, let's try this, this, and this, because you can't punish my child because another kid's actions. Okay.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
you can't change placement without my permission. Even if the rest of the team decides, if the rest of the team decides, was I involved in that decision though? Was she in there when they just made this decision?
Yeah.
Oh, she was. Okay.
And she said she disagreed with it, but they told her that she didn't really have a choice, because
Did
they
she-
said that they told her that it didn't matter what she said, because the rest of the team agreed on it and they wrote it up as a safety plan, she
And
said.
They wrote it.
It was
though?
labeled as a safety plan. Yeah.
Okay. Did she sign the IEP and check that she agreed? Because that's another question I would ask is, did you agree? There's a box that says agree. You don't have to check that. But if you don't check that, then I would go in under I can't remember what it's called now, but there's a section where you can write down your concerns, and I would say I do not
Well, she
agree.
says she signed the paperwork when they arrived.
Okay. Well,
I
and if
think
you
that's just who attended.
yeah, if
Well,
you
we'll
want,
talk. We can talk
that's what I was gonna say. If you want to, you can have her call me
via
too, and we'll we can.
email with this, but go ahead.
I was just gonna say, if you, I can't hear you. You're cutting in and out. If you want to, you can give her my information, and I'll talk to her. I'd like to look at the IEP and see what they've written in. I'd like to look at all of it, and just to see how they worded it, because it's kind of suspicious.
Yeah. Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? I don't want to take all the time up or does anybody have anything to say or questions?
Sarah?
Yeah, I actually have a question.
Okay.
My daughter, I'm in Norman Public Schools, and my daughter is on an IEP. She has Williams syndrome, and she will be in 3rd grade. And last year was our first year on an IEP, and they pulled her to the resource classroom for math and reading. And the resource teacher is real nice. I don't necessarily know that she knows exactly what to do with my daughter. And so I reached out to the reading specialist, because she's fabulous, to say, can I write in my IEP that she would go to you instead of to that resource classroom? And she sounded like I couldn't do that. Is that true?
Well, yes and no. So, okay. So reading specialist doesn't fall under special education services.
Uh-huh.
So you could write it into the IEP, but then the team would have to agree on that.
Okay.
I mean, you can write anything into the IEP as long as the team agrees to it. The problem
Right.
is that those services aren't actually, they don't fall under special education. Does that make sense? I mean,
Right. I think my concern for her was that I think putting her with kids, it does better for Hallie to be with kids to not be with the same kids all day. And so my thought was, well, if I'm going to go pay for tutoring with a reading specialist after school, why wouldn't I use her during the day?
Yeah.
That's in her classroom.
Yeah. It makes more sense. Are they just refusing to do that?
No, she said that, I think her reasoning was, it sounded more like a legality issue of like, well, since she wasn't my student last year, I can't do that. So I wondered if that was like a legal thing or a preference thing.
To my knowledge, and again,
Another thing that I would say, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say,
Cody. Sorry.
That's okay. To my knowledge, and I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an expert, but to my knowledge, that's not a legal thing, because you can write any services in to an IEP. As long as everybody agrees that it's what's best for the child to reach those goals, then you can do that. That being said, maybe at that school they've got some policy against. I don't know. I couldn't tell you that, but I would meet with the team and say, and maybe you just talk to the special ed director or teacher or somebody.
Right.
Look, can we do this? Is it even feasible?
Okay. That's helpful. I feel like your word of like, hey, it's helpful to go in, and I felt like that all across the board. I just was like, am I going in asking for Christmas in July, or is this like I can ask that? So.
No, in fact, sorry, Terry, I keep cutting you off, but let me throw this one last thing.
No, you're fine.
To kind of show you what kind of, I mean, and I don't say crazy, but outside the box kind of things people put in. We had I know of a lady that had a daughter who had some severe anxiety issues, like very severe, didn't want to go to school. What they actually wrote in to help her was they gave her an hour of equine therapy in the FFA barn. You know, so you can write things in there, anything, but it's a matter of the whole school or the whole team agreeing on it. So.
Okay.
So
Sorry,
what
Terry.
I was going to say is, no, you're fine. I was going to say it's not really a legal issue, but depending on how flexible and how accommodating your school is. I know some schools, you know, they just jump right on things. But I've even had families that I've went to IEP meetings with, and we've sat down the day before, and I've said, okay, what are your goals? What are your expectations of this school year, and what do you want out of this IEP meeting? And we will sit down and write out a list of goals. And And I've even had families where they email them to the special education director the day before and say, you know, if there's any way we can work these goals into the IEP, you know, if we
Right.
can work it in so that we can, you know, because I feel like this is what's going to make my child the most successful. You know your child better than anyone, so do not be afraid to ask for
Uh-huh.
something, even if you feel like it's way out of the box, because the only thing they can tell you is no.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, don't be afraid to ask for anything. And,
Uh-huh.
you know, I've gotten, there's a book called, and it's from Wright's Law, and it's from emotion. What is it called,
From
Cody?
emotions
Emotion to
to
advocate.
advocacy. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
I
And
have that.
there's lists of goals in there. There's
Okay.
goals you can request in there. So go through your book and,
Okay.
just go through there and look, because look, Cody's going to pull it out.
Well, I took it
But
out of my bag. Yeah, I
yeah.
was just going to show everybody else. She said she has it, but I was going to show everybody else that I've got it somewhere.
Yeah, but I mean, even though you could even Google, you know, what are some IEP goals, you know, and I mean, you know what your child's capable of, you know
Yeah.
what your expectations are for her, and I
Yeah.
mean, don't be afraid to set high goals.
And don't be
Okay.
afraid to ask why. If they tell you no, and this is
Uh-huh.
advice to anybody, if they tell you no,
Mm-hmm.
ask them and be polite about it. But okay, can you tell me
Right.
why that wouldn't be reasonable? Why is it we can't do that? Make them explain it to you. And then if
Yeah.
you really get down to it and you really don't agree with what they're telling you, you can say, okay, can you write that down for me? I want that in writing just so that I have it, you know,
Right.
and then go ask somebody else, you know.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That's really helpful. Thank you. We have
Mhm.
we have a great team at our school, but I do this is new territory, and so I'm always wanting to know everything I can so that we can get everything out of the school that we can. So,
Sure.
And
Well,
see, a lot of schools really are willing to work with you. They just
uh-huh.
want to, they don't know, and they want to partner with parents. They want to be
Yeah.
a team. They want the parent at the table, because the parent is the expert on the child,
yeah.
because you
Right.
know your child better than anyone, and they want to partner with you. So
Yeah.
they just need to know what you want. And that's what those, you know, if you write all that out and, you know, just um, give them a heads up. You know, I would even say give it to them before the IEP meeting, so they have a chance to look over it and even address all of the goals that you have requested prior to the
Right.
IEP meeting, so that, you know, I mean, because if you walk in there and you say, I want this, this, and this, and this, they have no
They don't know how to respond.
grounds to discuss that prior. Yeah, and they don't know how to respond to it. So to be able to give them like a heads up and say, you know, this is something that I really want. I mean, because you know what you want for your child.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. It's really helpful.
No problem. And what my wife and I always did, and I always recommend this to anybody, if you're going into an IEP meeting, or if you're just going into a meeting, you know, you have a big meeting with the school,
Uh-huh.
we called it pregame. And we would
Mhm.
pregame, we would sit down and say, okay, what are we going to talk about tomorrow? We're going to
Yeah.
talk about this, this, and this. What is it we're requesting? And even that gives you a time to research too. Is this reasonable? Is this something,
Yeah.
you know, feasible to ask for? So,
Yeah. That's awesome. Thank you guys so much.
mhm. Anybody else? Okay, Terry, I think you and I need to discuss maybe doing one of these with the IEP training.
Yes, for sure.
Okay.
And just to let everybody know before, I mean, but I think
Oh,
the full IEP training, I think that would be a great one, and we could get that scheduled pretty quick. The other thing is, just to let everybody know, tomorrow we're partnering with the Oklahoma Disability, I can't ever say it right, ODDC, and it's Jen Randall, and she is going to be doing a one-page profile. And one-page profiles are amazing because it's a way to describe your child without talking about the child's disability. So you're going to be able to, it's a great tool, and it's really quick, and Jen is a fun speaker, so you'll really enjoy her. So if you haven't registered for that, the link is on the OFN page, or you can send me I'll put my email in the chat for everybody to have. You can send me an email, and then I can get you registered for that. It's also free, and I believe it'll be at the same time tomorrow evening, and it's just like a little 45-minute session, but it's really a great session.
Hey, for everybody that's still on, please do me a favor. We have a grant, so we need to do a quick survey. I'm going to put it up here on the screen. If you guys will take just a minute and fill this out for me, that would be great, and it'll help me out with my grant. So I'm going to throw that up. Terry, I didn't think about doing this in Spanish.
Oh, yeah, I didn't either. I'm sorry.
Well, do you think
Well, we can see at the end how many we don't have, and then we can.
Okay.
Because it'll give us a total of how many people. It'll give you a total. It won't give me one because I turned the host over to you.
Yeah.
But if anybody has any questions or anything, my email, Cody's email's in the chat box, my email's in the chat box along with my cell phone number.
Thank you guys. When you're done with the poll, if you guys want to go ahead and log off, that's fine. We'll stay on here for a couple more minutes if you have questions.
Yes, we appreciate you guys joining.
Okay, 10 of 10 voted. Okay, so we got 10 that took it. So let's see. One is
We got everybody.
okay. Let me record these. 2 is 3.
There's a question in the chat box and it says, my child is doing virtual learning right now. I don't exactly have questions yet, but I have a lot of concerns. Please consider offering something in a couple of months to ensure we can do that full, the full IEP training that Cody was talking about. And then I know that my boss, Joni Bruce, is offering a training October the 8th, I believe it is.
Terry, you're cutting out a little bit.
And that training is going to do, it's going to do a lot of information about telling your story and partnering with your school. And if you guys don't know, a lot of these trainings are listed on oh, I'm in the country, you guys. I'm sorry. I'm going to type.
Yeah, you're
I don't have the
cutting
whole
it.
name right now. I know it's OFN Homecation Ideas Why Staying at Home. Yeah. Okay. Well, I put it in the chat box.
There you go. All right. I think that's all we got then.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much.
Terry, thank you. I will log off, I think.
All right. Well, you guys have a great evening.
Bye, y'all.
All right. Bye, Cody.